Welcome back into Talking Fitchburg. Joining me today from the National Weather Service Milwaukee, Sullivan. It's my favorite meteorologist because he's the only one I know. It is Tim Halbach. Maybe you could introduce me to some of your friends. I don't know.
No, I'm not going to introduce you to any of my friends. So
Well,
sorry.
that means you have to have friends there, Tim. Come on. Jeez.
Oh,
A cheap
all
shot.
right,
All
this
right.
interview's over.
This interview's done. We're doing something different. We joke because Tim has been a friend of the show. He's invited us out to the Weather Service before, but more importantly, we get to spend the time talking about severe weather awareness. Happens each year in April, where we focus on tornadoes and severe weather specifically, and that's why we have you here today. So we're going to talk in general about the things that you want to share this year. But for the National Weather Service corporate office, what is the message this year that we're getting out to folks?
Well, it's pretty much the same as a lot of other years where, we're at the beginning of what is normally the beginning of our severe weather season. So we do a lot of reminders to people about, it's a mindset change from your winter weather preparedness stuff, where you're worried a little bit more about roads being slippery. Now you got to think about, where am I going to go if there's a tornado? So thinking about those vulnerable situations that people might be in. So we do a lot of work with saying, here are the spots to go in. These are the things to try to avoid. Um, a lot of the same things from year to year. Every year is a little bit different in terms of when it comes to the severe weather that we get. So this year started early. Some people have said, well, that's it, we're done, we're severe weather, we got our severe weather. But we're like right at the beginning of when we typically get severe weather here in Wisconsin. So just taking some time now while things are not busy or active is when you want to be thinking about this stuff, not 5 minutes before a tornado rolls through.
Yeah, we were talking before we did this interview that you know part of your the severe weather that hit early this year was putting out a lot of reminders of, hey, we got severe weather coming. Do you remember what you need to do in severe weather cases? Because we haven't had our awareness week yet. So very interesting that it played out that way a little bit. But the message is the same, and we'll dive through some of it. First area I want to get into is, and I think is something that has been such a game changer for you guys, is impact-based warnings, which I can think of in the early days, watching my favorite local meteorologists with 3 counties in a tornado warning, coming coming down the way, and now you guys have it down to such a small area. Tell us how this works.
So how it works, it used to work that we'd put out a warning for part of a county and it would light up the whole thing. So now they are all storm-based warnings. So we draw a little box or polygon is what we call it, and that's the area of where that hazard is most likely to occur. So it's might not be the entire box that we draw, but typically we try to center it and try to have some wiggle room in case the storm shifts one way or another. But within those warnings, for tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, flash flood warnings, we have 3 levels that we can take these warnings to. And we use that to be able to talk about the severity of that weather that we're expecting. So with tornado warnings, there's base tornado warnings. The next level up is considerable level. And then the third level is catastrophic or a tornado emergency. So we want to be talking about an EF0 type tornado differently from a Barneveld type tornado. There's things that we can tell from radar alone that tells us, hey, maybe this is just going to be a quick spin up. We're not going to throw all the bells and whistles out on these types of scenarios, even though it still will do some damage when that occurs. But on the days when we have the potential for an EF2 or higher tornado, we got to talk about that a little bit different. Say this is a little bit more of a life-threatening situation. So if you're not taking this seriously, please take this one. Get to your shelter, do all the things you need to do. So based on these different levels too, your phone will trigger the wireless emergency alert. So all the tornado warnings will get what WEAD is what we call it. With severe thunderstorm warnings, it's the third level. So anything that if we put 80 miles per hour wind into the warning, or baseball size hail and larger, that's when that'll trigger. And with flash flood warnings, it's the second level out of the 3, the considerable level. So thinking like a 4 to 8 inch type rainfall or something like that, where people are getting stranded and having to do rescues, things like that. So these are all to get your attention. A lot of people that I've talked to that have been busy, like cleaning their garage or things like that, that have had their house hit by a tornado, the Weir, the wireless emergency alert, was the first thing that notified them to say, hey, something bad is coming your way. So they see the phone, maybe check outside. Oh, yeah, it's dark. I better get to my basement. So those are what those different levels are for, just to talk about what level of a warning we're at.
Yeah, it's I think it works very well, and I think explaining it, is getting that message out there as you just did. I think is the best education you can continue to do, and get your mind wrapped around what's going on in these situations, and I think it's giving it a little bit more depth of how you're breaking these things down, because you guys aren't mind readers. If you could be, you would be for weather, but weather throws a loop in everything that's going on. Another way that you can get the word out is you do have outlooks and risk factors that you can put out there ahead of time too. So we know things are coming. 1 to 3, even sometimes you can be like, hey, a week out, you guys might know, but you might not jump on the horse just right away. But you've got ways of getting people's attention ahead of time. And how's that done?
So with any goal of preparedness, is it's knowing that something potentially is going to be coming from further out than just like 30 minutes ahead of time. So the outlooks, there's thunderstorm risk outlooks from the Storm Prediction Center. These are the nation's experts in severe weather forecasting. So they forecast for the whole United States, and they'll highlight areas where they think severe weather is going to occur. So it's on a scale of 1 to 5, marginal risk being the lowest. Days like that, it's maybe like 1 or 2 storms that could go severe. And as you go up the scale, from slight risk to enhanced to moderate to high, it's just a more widespread or potentially more dangerous type of a situation. So when I start seeing that we're in a slight risk for severe weather, that's typically in the office here. We're talking about, all right, how many staff members do we need to get through this? Because we got to do more stuff like warnings. Somebody's watching radar, somebody's communicating that and that. So the higher up the scale you go, just the more widespread and severe or the higher end type scenarios you might get. So high risks are very, very rare, and they're only going to be used when we're expecting a tornado outbreak type of a day. So those are these. We basically kind of hold those back for. All right, this is going to be the really, really bad type day for somebody. So we really want to get the message out on those days. So again, those are forecasts, and the goal there is just to give some people some heads up that hey, a couple days from now, you might want to start thinking about what your plans are if you've got an event going on, or if you're working at a school or a hospital, things like that.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. And we could branch off and just have a conversation about putting that plan together. And in all seriousness, it's something that you really need to do and have, because you don't want to be reacting in the moment. It's hard to do that, and that's why we practice a lot of things, including the practice tornado drills that we do during the Severe Weather Awareness Week. But you want to have those action plans in place. One of the areas that I do want to focus on, because it doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's becoming sort of a norm, is flooding. And I don't like to use that as a norm type of conversation. Opinion by Jeremy Crosby only. But flood events are devastating, and not only just because of property, but of life, and especially at night, it's hard to see. So flash flooding in general, where do you guys sit on that, and the outreach? Why is that so important?
Yeah. So again, it all starts with the forecast and letting people know that there's a potential for this flash flooding. A lot of times it happens at night, and it's from thunderstorms. It's the number one way that people die from thunderstorm related hazards. So even more than tornadoes or damaging winds or lightning, it's typically people driving their car through flooded roadway. And I've seen it myself firsthand. I not drowning, but I saw a gentleman when I was in Watertown a few years ago. It was the week before Madison and Dane County started flooding with the high amounts of rainfall, and I watched the man. There was this viaduct that was all flooded over, and this man drove around the barricade and just drove straight into the water. And I don't know if he thought that things would part, or if it maybe wasn't that deep, or the car would just push its way through the water. But as soon as you get within 2 feet of the deep of water, your car is going to start floating. So this gentleman was elderly, so he was basically stuck until some firefighters came, and they just happened to rescue him right before the car started this thing. So one of the things is just, even if you don't drown from a flooded roadway or something like that, you're probably going to ruin your car. And I don't know if anybody's tried to buy a used car lately. I've had to do that in the last few months. It's not a fun process. So if you're looking for some pain with having to go through and have to find a new car or used car or something like that, chances are you'll wreck your car if you drive it through some of these really deep flooded roadways and you stall it out. So just best. Our slogan is "Turn around, don't drown." It's just easier to try to find a different way to get through to where you're going, even if it adds a few minutes on to where you're trying to get to. Better to be a little bit late to where you're going rather than trash your car or drown.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head, and we're hearing and seeing across the United States of more flooding events from storms, and I think it's one of those that you compare tornado versus flooding. Everybody, oh, the tornado, but the flooding is probably where you're going to see more of than you're going to see of tornadoes. Knock on wood. I don't want to see any of those. Thank you very much, Tim. But
Yeah.
there is that. Transitioning then to finishing out with just some general tornado talk. We've seen it earlier this year in the springtime. We've had some tornadoes come through. Messaging for you guys when it comes to tornadoes in Wisconsin. How do we fare, and what do we need to be on the lookout for?
So the best thing is just having shelters picked out ahead of time. So if you're in your house, being in the basement is ideal. Anywhere below grade is the spot to go to. If you don't have a basement, just finding an interior room or closet or bathroom where it's not an exterior wall or there's no glass or anything like that, that's a good spot to go to. So the important thing too is to have a way to get those warnings. So a lot of people get the wireless emergency alerts on their phones. They might have an app set up. The Weather Service doesn't have an app that you can use, but FEMA has one, and a lot of your local TV stations have one as well, which will send you those alerts. Otherwise, weather radio, turning on the TV, just kind of get an idea of what that risk level is for you. But most importantly is staying in a shelter or knowing where to go. And if you have a vulnerable situation, like if you're in a manufactured or mobile home, there's been even with the weaker tornadoes, those have destroyed some of those. So if you live in one of those, knowing where you can go and how long it takes to get there is very important. So those are some of the things that we just ask people to think about and play those scenarios out in their head now, where you'd go. Make sure everybody in your family knows and where to go, because you all want to be on the same page so that you quickly get and be safe when something comes through.
All right, I wanted to ask this on the last conversation we had, but we ran out of time, and I'm going to go on this. Why in the heck are all the storms going right towards the weather office? You guys have had so many close calls issuing tornado warnings for yourself. What is it? Why'd you guys turn into a magnet all of a sudden? And what the heck do you do when you're like, oh man, this is going to be for us? Where are we going?
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's happened. Maybe we can blame like a new employee that started 4 or 5 years ago that brought that weather with them. But what we do, we have backup plans. We have a shelter here at the office that if it looks like a tornado is headed for the office or we issue a warning that we need to get to shelter, we call the Green Bay or Chicago office, and they take over warning responsibilities. They typically have it up anyways if it looks like something's getting close, so we can jump in there. I've had that happen once before in my career. I was at La Crosse when we had a tornado that crossed the Mississippi River and came through the south side of La Crosse, and it looked like it was coming right for the office. And we had to call the Des Moines office, and they took over warning responsibility until things cleared out, and then we were able to jump back on and handle things. But thankfully, knock on wood again. Hopefully, that's our quota of local tornadoes near us in the past few years.
I don't know. It just seems like every time I turn around, I'm like, oh man, this is going right for the office again. And I'm like, I just cannot recall that that's been the case. And it's got to be scary to be doing surveys right in your own backyard, so close to the office.
Yeah, well, now like we've had a couple paths that have gone just north of the office that I get to drive by on my way home from work every day. So there's two paths that I cross as I'm going home. The one night, July 29th, when we had the tornadoes come through,
Mhm.
every single road to our north was blocked because we had a tornado that came from Concord and went through just to our north. So that added about a half hour to an hour to try to figure out a clear path that was tornado free that I could get back home to. But thankfully, nobody's been injured here or anything like that. So we've been lucky from that sense.
Yeah, if you don't know, folks, they have a, big piece of wood there that they knock every day. They come in, they knock on it. It's not to knock to come in; it's to knock to stay safe and keep you all safe out there. And you do that a number of different ways all year long. Tim, how can people stay up to date with what's going on at the office, alerts, and if you're fascinated like weather, like I am, we want to hear from you. So how do we find you?
Facebook, we have a Facebook page. If you search for U.S. National Weather Service Milwaukee Sullivan, or just facebook.com/NWS Milwaukee. We're also on Twitter as well. So at NWS Milwaukee is our Twitter page. Otherwise, a lot of our information is on our weather.gov/Milwaukee page as well. So a lot of stuff out there. Some of it's buried, but that's how you kind of stay up to date on what we got going on.
We have that here at the city of Fitchburg too. We call it resources. There's a lot of
Right.
resources out there, and we'll help you guide your way to it. But either way, Tim, thank you so much for your time again. Hopefully, we'll have you on talk a little bit about winter weather after summer. But for now, we'll just see where the weather takes us, and we hope your team stays safe and has a successful summer, keeping us safe.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate you having me.